welcome to World Stories on Via Television. I am Deborah Ndekaife. This week, we'll take a look at top stories making the rounds from across the globe. Now, major headlines in the week under review includes Japan's second attempt to launch its next-generation H3 rocket failed. Also, Xi Jinping was handed a third term as Chinese president, and United States risked a confrontation with Beijing. We'll bring you the stories and more after the break. Now, starting from the African scene, Kenya is widening the rollout of the groundbreaking malaria vaccine to its lake endemic region, where many children under the age of 5 are killed by the mosquito-borne disease. The World Health Organization recommended the RTS malaria vaccine for broader use in 2021 after a successful pilot scheme in Kenya, Ghana, and Malawi.
25,000 children have been vaccinated against malaria. Within these areas, there has been a substantial reduction in deadly severe malaria, a drop in child hospitalizations, and a reduction in child deaths.
It's a real issue, and you can see, especially from the numbers in the outpatients, the number of children being admitted as a result of the complications of malaria, whether it's anemia, whether they need blood transfusion, whether it's coma. So I think it's a really good additional tool.
Now, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called for a review of foreign interference in his country's election and will appoint an independent special investigator to probe alleged Chinese meddling in Canada's polls. Trudeau has come under pressure to act amid Canadian media reports citing anonymous intelligence sources that detail alleged scheme run by China to influence Canada's election in 2021 and 2019. The Globe and Mail newspaper reported that China preferred to see Trudeau's Liberals re-elected in the 2021 election and had worked to defeat conservative politicians considered unfriendly to Beijing. The Prime Minister said he had asked legislators in the Parliament's National Security Committee to launch an investigation to assess the state of foreign interference in the country's federal electoral process. Japan's second attempt to launch its next-generation H3 rocket failed after liftoff, with the space agency issuing a disrupt command after concluding that the mission could not succeed. The failure is a blowout for Japan's space agency JAXA, which has built the rocket as a flexible and cost-effective new flagship. But the first launch was delayed by several years and then failed on a first attempt last month when the solid rocket boosters did not ignite. Tuesday's launch from the Tanegashima Space Center in southwestern Japan initially appeared to be a success, with the rockets lifting off at 10:13 a.m. There was no immediate explanation for why the launch failed, though JAXA is expected to hold a press conference later. At least 15 people had died in two landslides triggered after 6 days of torrential rains hit villages on an island in Indonesia's remote Natuna Regency. Now, rescuers were still searching for 42 missing people trapped in about 27 houses that were buried under the mud after the landslides. Dozens of soldiers, police and volunteers are searching in the Genting and Pangkalan villages on a remote island surrounded by choppy waters and high waves in the Natuna Group at the edge of the South China Sea. Natuna's disaster agency said rescuers pulled 8 injured people from the landslide, 4 of whom were in critical condition and were rushed to a hospital in Pontianak City. An estimated 12,000 Rohingya have been left without shelter after fire tore through part of a cramped refugee camp in southern Bangladesh, destroying health centers, learning facilities, and mosques. The fire broke out at Camp 11 of Cox's Bazar refugee camp, which is home to more than 1 million Rohingya refugees, including 700,000 who fled their home and country, Myanmar, after a brutal military crackdown in 2017. Tin Liwin, whose home was destroyed in the blaze, said the fire began at about 2:40 p.m. His two young children were out playing at the time. The family spent Monday morning cleaning the burned debris that was once their shelter and fixing a temporary roof. Fires are a frequent problem in the camps where people live in extremely cramped conditions in flimsy bamboo and tarpaulin shelters. Rohingya are also confined to the camps ringed by barbed wire fencing. A United States risked a confrontation with Beijing, saying Washington was not seeking a conflict and saw no change in the United States-Chinese relations. John Kirby, the White House National Security spokesperson, responded to China's foreign minister's warning to Washington to change its distorted attitude or risk conflicts. Kirby said the United States respected the One China policy and did not want to see a change to the status quo pertaining to Taiwan, which China considers a breakaway province. Now, Kirby also urged China not to provide military assistance to Russia in support of its war with Ukraine. U.S. officials have previously expressed concerns that such aid might be forthcoming. Ukraine has denied any involvement in the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines following a media report citing new intelligence that a pro-Ukrainian group may have been behind last year's attack targeting Russia's gas deliveries to Europe. The dismissal by a senior Ukrainian officials came in response to a report by the New York Times, which cited new intelligence that had been revealed by United States officials. The New York Times said the new intelligence reviewed by United States officials suggested a group loyal to Ukraine but acting independently of the government in Kyiv were involved in the operation. Mystery has surrounded who might be responsible for the brazen sabotage last September, which damaged two pipelines transporting Russia's gas into the European Union and targeted a crucial source of revenue for Moscow. Both pipelines were closed at the time of the attack, which came months after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has warned of drawing conclusions too hastily following the report. He added that the chance of a false flag operation was within the realm of possibilities. Syrian civil defense volunteer Salam Mahmoud has played an instrumental role in search and rescue operations after deadly earthquakes devastated Syria and Turkey. She is one of around 300 women in the rescue service which operates in northwestern Syria. Mahmoud volunteers with the Syrian Civil Defense, otherwise known as the White Helmet. Mahmoud's usual role looks more like this, providing primary health care for women in the western Idlib region. But when the earthquake struck, she was ready to dig alongside her male counterpart, despite what some people thought about it.
مكان الدمار ومكان الزلزال تعرضنا كثير للانتقادات انه انتم ما بصير تنزلوا على هذا المكان، ما بصير، بس هذا الشيء كلياته قلب من السلبي للايجابي الحمد لله رب العالمين، وحسبنا بننقذ اكثر عدد من الارواح، وحسبنا بنكون عن جد قد ثقة العالم فينا، قد ثقة الاطفال والنساء اللي عم بتصيح لنا من تحت الانقاض. يا دفاع مدني ما صاحوا لا يا امي ولا يا ابي ولا يا اخي، كلياتهم صاروا حطوا املهم وين فينا بالدفاع المدني.
According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance, the earthquake has reportedly killed more than 4,500 people in northwest Syria. Women took part in rallies across Pakistan despite efforts by authorities in several cities to block the divisive march. Known as the Aurat Women March, the rallies have courted controversy because of banners and placards waved by participants that raise subjects such as divorce, sexual harassment, and menstruation. Each year, some of the most provocative banners ignite weeks of outrage and a slew of violent threats. The whole point of Aurat March is to demand the security and safety that women are not afforded in the country and society. Still on world stories, hundreds of demonstrators marched through the capital of Georgia to protest the Caucasian government's plans to introduce foreign agent laws reminiscent of Russian legislation used to silence critics. Now, some protesters hold banners that nod to International Women's Day. The march comes after more than 60 people were detained and dozens of police officers wounded in violent clashes that broke out in the capital, Tbilisi, amid fears of democratic backsliding in Georgia.
ძველ დროში გვინდა ევროპა, გვინდა დასავლეთი და გვინდა ნათელი მომავალი ჩვენთვის და ჩვენი შვილებისთვის. ამიტომ მე ვფიქრობ, რომ ყველა უნდა იყოს აქ დღეს და თუ ყველა გავერთიანდებით, აუცილებლად მივიღებთ შედეგს.
ჩვენთვის ჩვენ რატო გვწირავენ რუსეთისთვის მართლა არ ვიცი. ჩვენ შვილებს რატო წირავენ არ ვიცი და ის რაც წლების და საუკუნეების წინ ავირჩიეთ, ამას რატო გვაიძულებენ რომ გადავუკვირდეთ არ ვიცი.
When War Story returns, suspected elite Democratic Forces militants have killed no fewer than 40 people in twin attacks in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, local officials said on Thursday. We're going on a short break, and when we come back, War Story continues.
Before you came round, my heart would never beat.
The story of a charmer and his crush.
Before you came round, I was ready to slow down. Before you came round, I was heading for a small disaster. Before you came round, I was ready to blow me down.
Tat Fragrance, the new luxury fragrance for men and women.
Welcome back. Xi Jinping was handed a third term as Chinese president on Friday, capping a rise that has seen him become the country's most powerful leader in generations. His appointment by China rubber stamp parliament comes after Xi locked in another 5 years. Affected Allied Democratic Forces militants have killed no fewer than 40 people in twin attacks in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, local officials said on Thursday. The ADF, which the Islamic State group claims as its Central African affiliate, is one of the deadliest armed militias in eastern Congo, accused of slaughtering thousands of civilians. Fighters from the group attacked the neighboring villages of Mukundi and Mausa in the Beni territory of North Kivu province during Wednesday evening and the early hours of Thursday, officials said. And Kalunga Muso, a local administrator, told newsmen that 38 people had been killed in Mukundi and 8 in Mausa, stressing the death toll was provisional. Russia on Thursday launched a massive attack against Ukraine using kamikaze drones and a barrage of missiles in the first major assault against Ukrainian energy and civil infrastructure in weeks. Authorities in several regions across the Ukraine reported casualties and damage. Authorities reported emergency power shutdowns in several regions and trains are delayed across the country. The largest nuclear power plant in Europe, the Zaporizhzhia MPP in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, was completely cut off from the power grid after the attack, Ukrainian Energy Minister German Galushenko said in a statement sent to the press. Xi Jinping was handed a third time as Chinese president on Friday, capping a rise that has seen him become the country's most powerful leader in generation. In his appointment by China's rubber stamp parliament comes after Xi locked in another 5 years as head of the Chinese Communist Party in October. Since then, the 69-year-old has weathered widespread protest over his zero-COVID policy and the deaths of countless people after its abandonment. But those issues have been avoided at this week's National People's Congress, a carefully choreographed event that is also set to appoint Xi's ally Li Qiang as the new premier. A shooting at a Jehovah's Witness center in the German city of Hamburg has left 8 people dead, including the suspected gunman, police said Friday, as the motive for the attack remained unclear. Several more people were injured in the attack on Thursday evening at the Kingdom Hall building in the port city of Hamburg, where Jehovah's Witnesses members were attending a religious service. 8 people were fatally injured, apparently including the suspected perpetrator, Hamburg police said in a statement, adding that several other people were hurt. The Jehovah's Witness in the Germany Association said it was deeply saddened by the horrific attack on its members.
Gar nicht realisiert, was da gerade genau passiert. Da habe ich das mit meinem Handy gefilmt und durch den Zoom habe ich erst festgestellt, dass da gerade jemand schießt bei den Zeugen Jehovas. Und während ich das gefilmt habe, habe ich erst realisiert, was da gerade vor sich geht.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Friday formally set May 14 as the date for parliamentary and presidential elections, a month earlier than scheduled, despite February's devastating earthquakes. Now, the election could be the country's most significant in decades, and it will determine whether the country will take a more democratic path or continue on the increasingly authoritarian course set by Erdogan, who is seeking to extend his 2 decades in power. Erdogan has led Turkey since 2003, first as prime minister and as president since 2014, but this year's election could be his most challenging. At least 3 people have been wounded in a shooting in the Israeli city of Tel Aviv and are being treated by emergency services, Israel's ambulance service has said, as television footage showed large numbers of police and medical workers at the scene. The shooting took place next to a cafe on the corner of Dizengoff Street and Ben Gurion Street, the Magen David Adom ambulance service said. Israeli police said the assailant had been neutralized but provided no details about the circumstances of the shooting, which they said could be a terrorist attack. Police and medics were still on the scene and it was unclear if they were looking for a second attacker. Only a few survivors are left in the village of Mukundi, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where ADF militants hacked dozens of people to death during an attack this week. Fighters from the militia, which is assigned to the Islamic State group, killed over 40 people in Mukundi and the nearby village of Mausa, according to local officials. Now, some villagers described how they had welcomed the fighters before the killing started. Kavungo Songo, a 40-year-old farmer from Mukundi, said that villagers initially thought that the armed men who were wearing military fatigues were simply paying a visit.
Dieu par des faits, mais il n'y a pas eu crépitement de balles.
Thousands of protesters marched through London to the British Prime Minister's residence to demand a better healthcare system in the United Kingdom. The protest, which was organized by healthcare workers and activists on Saturday, went off in the city centre and ended near the British Prime Minister's residence just to support the healthcare workers who have held a series of strikes over bad pay conditions in the state-funded National Health Service. Participants were seen carrying placards as they chanted slogans and demanded better wages and working conditions. The development comes as almost 40,000 junior doctors who are an essential part of hospital care are set to go on a 3-day strike starting on Monday. Monday's upcoming strike would have a lasting impact on cancer care and waiting lists, the country's top doctors said. Hundreds of thousands of people have rallied in cities across Israel for a 10th consecutive week, protesting against plans by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government to curb the Supreme Court's powers. And organizers said a record 500,000 people attended the rallies, making them some of the biggest in Israel's history. Media in Israel put the turnout at 250,000 to 300,000 people. The demonstration comes as Netanyahu's government prepares to press on with its legislative agenda next week, showing calls for a pause to allow for negotiations on the divisive judicial reforms. Now, more than 1 million people marched as strikes disrupted transport and schools in France during protests against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to push back the retirement age to 64. And police used tear gas in Paris, and minor clashes also took place in the western city of Nantes. But the more than 260 union-organized rallies across the country were mostly peaceful. France's Senate voted the late Saturday to approve a deeply unpopular reform to the country's pension system. And that's all on World Stories. Many thanks for watching. I am Deborah Ndakaife. Please stay tuned and enjoy the rest of our programs.